who met as two colleagues. Our lives would become very intertwined later. And I was so glad when Steve came back into my life. And it happened over several pre-showings of Trembling Before God. For those of you that are familiar with the film, the link to get to it is in the resource packet. And Steve is, again, you can read, he's from YU, you can read his pedigree and all that, but is a mensch, is an amazing person, a role model for all of us in so many ways. And I'm just thrilled that he agreed to come here today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to a very dear friend of mine, Rabbi Stephen Greenberg. We'll just, can we close it? We'll do anything? Or just, okay. We'll take it. James is great.
Sunnie. Get like a pile of books that I can, something that I can rest this on to navigate it a little bit.
Good morning, everybody.
Can you get the light back on?
Oh, sorry about that.
So I too want to begin with just a word of thanks. It's an incredible gift, a somewhat scary one on my part to kind of have taken this task on, and I appreciate the challenging tasks. I want to thank Sunnie and Evan. I want to thank Ivy for the space, and Estelle and Joey for joining and sharing their story personally. I am here in part because I came out publicly in 1999 as the first openly gay Orthodox rabbi, and when my partner and I moved to Cincinnati in order to be able to welcome in a baby girl who had been born with surrogacy in India into our lives. We couldn't do that in New York. Steve got a job in Cincinnati. We were immediately excluded from the Orthodox synagogue, told never to walk in the door again. So I am no stranger to exclusion and have not been since I came out in 1999. And I take this duty to articulate a kind of overlay, a kind of intersection of exclusions and understand them while remaining incredibly, I would say, cautious about exactly quite what the differences between them are. Franz Rosenzweig, theologian, philosopher, educator of the early 20th century, the author of The Star of Redemption, the founder of the Lair House, which produced a form of adult education which is still revolutionary, and translated the Bible in incredible form. By the way, suffered from Lou Gehrig's disease. Toward the end of his life, with the help of his wife Edith, he would recite letters. She would recite letters in the alphabet, and he would point to the letters until she figured out the word, and later he was able to communicate only with blinking of his eyes. His final attempt to communicate thought was on December 9th of 1929. He says, in quote, "And now it comes to the point of all points, which the Lord has revealed to me in my sleep, the point of all points for which there..." And at that moment the doctor came in and said he had to speak with Dr. Rosenzweig. When the doctor left, Rosenzweig did not wish to continue writing in this laborious way, and he died that night. No one ever understood or could hear the last words of that sentence. What indeed was the point of all points that was never articulated? When I speak to people with disabilities, here's what I hear most. Include us, not for our sake, but for your sake. Include us because we have an enormous amount to give, and we belong with you. Goya, famously, the painter, in 1793 became deaf, and due to that, sunk into depression. In 1936, Paul Klee had done 25 works of art, but then due to an autoimmune disease, was confined to much more limited movement. And indeed, due to his challenges, began to paint furiously. In 1938, 482 works. In 1939, 1,253 works. Henri Matisse in 1941 became confined to a wheelchair due to meningitis. And due to his confinement, invented new forms of art that he had never conceived of before with cutouts. And of course, famously, Beethoven, during the last portion of his life, was deaf. And so, I want to speak first about, indeed, the challenge we all have to stop thinking of disabled people as impaired, as unproductive or incapable of contribution. As a young man in Yeshiva University, I met Chavi Willig. Some of you may have heard of her, an Orthodox woman, the sister of Rabbi Willig of Yeshiva University, and she contracted polio at the age of 3 and indeed had lived in a wheelchair for much of her life. She wrote a memoir recently, A Life Notwithstanding, which was published 2 years ago. And I want to quote her because Chavi is amazing. She, by the way, just the story is remarkable. She would attend Lincoln Square Synagogue and always talk about how no one ever asked her, like, do you want to date somebody? And no one ever said, in Yirz Hashem, by dear, because they thought no one would ever marry, a woman in a wheelchair. And she met a blind man and fell in love. And they now live together for many years and have a family. I want to communicate the notion that people with disabilities are, this is Chavi talking, neither patients to be cured, nor children to be taken care of, nor brave souls to be admired. I often tell people, if I were to sum up my philosophy of life in 2 words, it's this: I want to be independently dependent. Which is, again, one of the reasons that I wrote my book, she said. The real tragedy of disability is this. It is the stigma that society attaches to the disability that far outweighs the disability itself. And so, I want to begin by addressing what I think we can together profit from in regard to our engagement with this tradition. I want to talk about this stigma, but before I do, I have to say that I began this task that Sunnie offered me with some hesitations. First, I feel that despite the claims that all marginalized people need to take care of each other, we don't know each other. And I don't feel capable, nor should any of us individually feel capable of articulating the unique experiences and stories of each other. Each of the struggles are unique and deserve to be heard independently, and that is indeed what we are going to do. I want to admit that for many people in the room, homosexuality is not a disability, for 2 reasons. One is it's not experienced as a disability by many people who are gay and lesbian, right? As well, Orthodox Jews often don't see homosexuality as in the category of disability because it's a halachic frame in their minds that is unique, distinct, and does not belong with deafness or blindness or confinement to a wheelchair. I want to argue that the reason they do actually overlap is because the experience of exclusion is often quite the same. When you have a tin ear and you come from a family of bricklayers, not such a disability. If you come from a family of musicians, it's awful. To belong to a community that so prizes family, relationship, marriage, and children, many of us who are gay avoid the sensibility that Orthodox culture actually renders us in some ways disabled. And so I take on this challenge of putting gay and lesbian identity in an uncomfortable space on both sides. One, there's no isur halacha of being deaf or blind, and there is halachic history to gay relationships that's troublesome and problematic and quite different from a halachic perspective than other kinds of exclusions. Nonetheless, I think it's instructive for us, in part because as SCOTUS has demonstrated, what used to be considered only a perversity of behavior is now understood as a diversity of identity. And what indeed we have now come to is a recognition that gayness isn't a chosen kind of lifestyle, but it is an identity that one discovers, not so different from the embodied identities that a deaf person or a blind person might discover. Thirdly, I want to suggest that it's important to remember, as I think Sunnie has suggested, that much of the halachic material is ambivalent. And we